So I am so happy and thrilled to introduce everyone to Mariana. Seems like she maybe knows a lot of you already and has had a chance to interact with you. She's been a um, kind of a beacon for me for many, many years in this work, maybe long before she actually knew me. I've always thought of her as a real truth teller, and that is can be rare in, in this world of truth. I love this about this particular book. There's a lot of conversation about rights, about power, about economic insecurity, about holding the trauma of hunger in our bodies and how that impacts us and our ability to actually end hunger in the United States. And there's just so much in here that's rich storytelling. And I'm just so excited to have you here, Mariana. Um, so formally, she's a professor of health management and policy, Dornsife. Did I say that right? Dornsife School of Public Health
Perfect.
at Drexel University. And she is well known for founding the Center for Hunger Free Communities. She launched the Witnesses to Hunger, which is, I think, maybe the first time I saw you, met you, Mariana, was in the halls of Congress when there was a big Witnesses to Hunger gathering there. And that program was and still is a movement to increase women's participation in the national dialogue on hunger and poverty, particularly women who are most impacted by hunger and poverty. Um, and as I mentioned, she's testified on solutions to hunger in the halls of Congress. So, Mariana, please add anything to that you'd like. And we welcome to our community again. I know you were with us in Birmingham, and that was exciting. And congratulations on the book.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be here in this group. It feels like a homecoming to a home that I wish that I had always had. And I always would be very envious of you all because I knew that you would be gathering and I somehow wasn't getting invited or knew about it. And anyway, I'm glad to be here today. Thank you very much. I'm recognizing that I think my internet is very slow, unless that yours was very slow. I mean, can you all hear me okay, or am I kind of cutting in and out? I'm doing okay?
Yep.
Okay. Um, and just in case if things start going a little funky in terms of the quality of my voice or the slides, please just get off of mute and like let me know, because what I'm going to do is turn off my camera in a minute so that I don't overload my internet.
I'll let you
Hi,
know,
everybody.
Mariana.
Okay.
I'll be on that.
Thank you, Allison. I appreciate it. So, hi, everybody. My name is Mariana. I'm zooming in today from Santa Fe, New Mexico, the land of the Tewa people, and many others. And I'm just honored to be here and talk about my book. And knowing that you all already know all the issues, I'm gonna mix and match. I might skip over a few slides, like 1, 2, skip a few. Let's talk about love. I don't really know how. I'm just gonna feel my way through, and not waste your time on defining the right to food, and all that jazz. I'll probably stick to things that I think maybe um, you all may not have talked about as a group. I'm not really, I don't know. So I'm going to land on some trauma and talk about love and talk about rights of nature for a minute, and we'll see how that lands and see what you all think. So I'll talk for about 25 to 30 minutes and then we'll dialogue from there. Does that sound okay? Is that about right? Okay. Are you seeing my title slide?
Mhm.
Fantastic.
Yes.
It's the painful truth about hunger in America. I'm going to turn off my camera just so it goes well. Okay. Again, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Um, Something that I think we don't do enough is, many of us do land acknowledgements, which is wonderful. And I am on the lands of the Tewa people and honor their elders, past, present, and emerging. And we should be giving all of their land back. But I also want to acknowledge the many people that I've worked with. I've been shaped by thousands of people throughout my research and my explorations on food insecurity and hunger. And it's really thanks primarily to a lot of Black and brown women and Indigenous people, that I've learned what I have, and that I have this particular ethos, a particular way of looking at hunger. And I just want to acknowledge this, so many beautiful people I've worked with over the years. And how can we talk about food insecurity and hunger if we're not paying attention to what's going on in Gaza? And I cannot move forward without just acknowledging the deep pain and the traumas that's going on right now in the world context that we are all witness to, all of us who are awake and paying attention. So I just want to just acknowledge the desperation in Gaza, and also juxtapose it with last week or 10 days ago, there was a major food festival in Tel Aviv, only about 40 kilometers away from where children are starving to death. So just had to acknowledge that. And I just want to also acknowledge the, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, just with his tears of total grief as he's trying to convince the world to stop starving the families of Gaza. That's how I feel pretty much every day. Today I'm going to talk about, just briefly, like a little bit of who I am. So some of you who don't know me, I'll talk about my trajectory over the last 25 years. I'll talk about the book, and I'll talk about the solutions that I offer up, which I go way beyond establishing the right to food, and putting it in our constitutions and creating national plans, et cetera. That's great, and we need it. But I go beyond that because I'm trying to get people to think beyond food, and I also want to see if I can get to the point where I talk about love. So I founded the Center for Hunger-Free Communities in 2004 by joining the multi-site study called Children's Health Watch, and those in the United States might be familiar with this work. It's straight up epidemiology, but very policy relevant. And it's been going on for over 25 years, and I ran the Philadelphia site. We also started a clinic for children with failure to thrive. We call it the Grow Clinic. That's still growing, so that's been going on for 20 years. I started a program called Witnesses to Hunger. I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And Allison, thank you for mentioning it. That's still an ongoing program in New Haven, Connecticut. I'll talk only very briefly about another program we started 10 years ago called the Building Wealth and Health Network, which is a trauma-informed peer support program for women who participate in cash welfare in the United States, and who have young children. And it's a way of coming together as a peer group to work through some emotional challenges, and then we help people open bank accounts and provide them some money to help them figure out how to manage their money and build their wealth. And I also started this cafe called the Eat Cafe. Eat stands for everyone at the table, and it was a beautiful idea. It lasted for 2.5 years, and that's the only project that I show you here that I had to end in 2019. I'm still filled with grief about it, and maybe we can talk more about it if you're interested. It does show up in the book, at the beginning of the book. I was an advisor on The Place at the Table, that feature-length documentary. I was a co-chair of the National Commission on Hunger, helped to advise Sesame Street on their development of a, quote, food insecure puppet. And then I have this book, The Painful Truth About Hunger in America. And if those of you in the States, if you don't have it and you want to buy it and not buy it from Amazon, you can get it from Penguin Random House. I'll put the link in the chat when I'm done with a code where you can get 20% off. But I think you can get it even cheaper at Amazon should you want to do that. Anyway, I have this fig leaf on the front cover. It was an interesting battle to not have food on the cover of my book, because I'm trying to get us to think beyond food if we're going to focus on hunger. Anyway, if you come away from anything from this book, is two things. First of all, that's a fig leaf, which is a Bodhi leaf. It's like the signal of the Buddha's enlightenment. The Buddha became enlightened, the story goes, under the Bodhi tree. And so people often think about it as just a signal of awakening. So the first thing is wake up, or let's stay awakened. And the second thing is love. It's in the shape of a heart. So that was very intentional and maybe a little unusual. But if you come away with two things, it's let's stay awake and bring in more love. In my book, I have 3 images, and I'm going to talk about each one of these briefly. So I just wanted to give you a little heads up. You all know this. I don't need to get into the details. In the US, our national rate is hovering between 10.5 to 11% currently. It's going to go way up in the next several years. But one thing I'm always making sure that people remember is the racial and ethnic inequities. Indigenous nations and communities have rates between 25% to 80%, and in the Klamath River Basin, it's up to 90%. People with disabilities have rates that are 4 times the national rate. Households headed by women, Black African American households, Hispanic, Latinx, immigrants have extremely high rates. Those who are LGBTQIA plus also have rates that are double the national rate. And people returning from prison. And of course, if you're thinking like this is just straight up public health, where we think about equity, love thinking about diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice. I'm going to say it loud and clear. What do these all have in common? What do these groups all have in common is discrimination. And because discrimination is what ties all of these groups together, this is one of the reasons that I insist that we've got to pay attention to the deeper issues. This is why I insist that a lot of us, like I'm a researcher and I'm an advocate. I'm a professor of public health. So most of the people I hang around who think about food insecurity tend to be researchers, and they're staying on the surface. And I am insisting that we've got to get underneath the ice and talk about racism and sexism, colonialism and enslavement. And we need to see those as forms of violence. So it's family trauma, racial trauma, intergenerational trauma, and historical trauma or unresolved grief. So lots of times people think about racism and sexism and forget actually, no, these are forms of violence. These are forms of trauma. Anyway, all of us know that these are related to disrupted relationships, poor school performance, poor physical and mental health, precarious living conditions. Us researchers tend to measure this through economic insecurity, so they all kind of get flattened into that. And then we start trying to get fancy and talk about the relationship between food insecurity and housing insecurity. And then the housing people try to work with the food people sometimes, but kind of forget. So we get stuck in these different silos of trying to understand economic insecurity, which is sitting on this mountain of trauma and violence. And we make relationships between food insecurity and poor health. But I'm insisting that we're continuing to skate on the surface. And the constantly focusing on biomedical approaches and the focus on food have very diminishing returns. And many of you have been working on food insecurity and hunger for decades. And, I bow to you, Dr. Graham Riches, for inspiring all of us to be focused on the right to food and to really getting underneath. And, we're trying to carry on your vision and your ideas forward, but it's really hard because sometimes we get stuck on the surface. So I'm saying we need more research and interventions lower down. So how can we melt the ice? I talk about this a little bit in my book about sort of the ice of the surface that we're skating on. I start the book by talking about we have a shared grief. If anybody's interested in food insecurity and hunger, then clearly they must be grieving. And that was very intentional for me to start with emotions. It's a trauma-informed approach to just recognize our emotions and be able to name them. And you can learn more about it in the book, or we can talk more about it. And I talk about that grief. Yeah, we share it, but it's also a doorway to new ways of thinking and doing in the world. And I quote Francis Weller, and if you haven't read The Wild Edge of Sorrow, I highly recommend it, or you can listen to it to learn more about how grief can be so helpful. You'll see this leaf appearing every now and then, which is sort of like a palate cleanser. I don't know. It helps me stay focused and organized. I'm trying to reduce oh, here we go. Okay. I'm just going to cut straight to the chase about the solutions that I talk about. Most of us stay on the political solutions. And you all here are thinking about human rights for sure, and solidarity economies. I also bring in the importance of decolonization and reparations. And I talk about needing to abolish police and prisons. We have got to think, I think that the trauma of food insecurity and hunger, what trauma often does is it truncates the imagination. And that's intentional so that you can't somehow break out of the rut or break out of your frame of thinking. And I'm bringing in the abolition of prison and police I show how in the foster care system and in the welfare systems, the carceral state is right there and waiting. And I think I might have a photo about it, or I talk about it a little bit more. Anyway, I'm trying to get us to have a broader imaginations, to think more sort of more radically and more in a more visionary way about political solutions. But even beyond the political solutions, I talk about the importance of doing personal work, and I talk about the importance of undoing white supremacy culture and how it lands in ourselves, and how to undo racism and sexism in ourselves. If you're going to make all of these major political changes, we've got to do some personal work, because it takes a lot of grit and ability to hold multiple points of view at once, and to jump out of the frame of white supremacy, which is controlling the United States currently, at least officially in the political system. And then, because it's so hard to do that political and personal work, I encourage us to get a little bit more spiritual. And I talk about needing to expand our ability to love and end the culture of domination that is unfortunately quite alive right now in the US. Okay, so now I'm going to jump into some things that maybe you all haven't thought about recently. Some of you may know about this. The Tema Okun has a really wonderful website where she talks about about white supremacy culture and their kinds of poisons. And these are things that oftentimes we take for granted. I think, as a professor, we've got some professors on here. We utilize some of these traits with thinking that this is just basic standard professionalism, but lots of times our focus on the written word and our binary thinking, either or thinking, or our individualism and our sense of urgency, that's one I fall prey to all the time, are actually manifestations of a kind of poison of white supremacy culture, and how it can be actually very harmful to people who don't have these kinds of ideas as a part of their culture, and yet they're sort of forced to fit into it. So I talk in the book about the need for white folks especially, but you don't have to be white to harness white supremacy culture. Everybody uses it to get by and survive in the global economy and in the world of academia and advocacy. And I talk about the need to unfreeze ourselves. And one of the ways to do that is to, first of all, acknowledge our grief, acknowledge the pain and the sadness that we're feeling as we're working on hunger and working alongside of people who are really struggling. And to develop that sense of empathy and connectedness and kinship with each other helps to melt some of that ice. It allows us to go deeper. I'm happy to share my slides afterwards. This is another slide I really love, and I share it with my students a lot. A lot of times we think of white supremacy as, the KKK and, racist jokes and lynching, et cetera, and that there's nothing else associated with it. But underneath of what's on the surface of white supremacy culture, what's, socially unacceptable, are apparently a lot of socially acceptable ways of doing things like paternalism, racial profiling, discriminatory lending, police brutality, English-only initiatives, tokenism, etc. We're seeing this play out in the US. Okay, jumping forward, decolonization is an obvious one. I'm just going to skip over this. If you just look at the land in the United States in 1492, I really love looking at this right now, and that was in 1997. Look how much indigenous land has been stolen, swindled, lost, overtaken, and colonized. And knowing that indigenous nations have the highest rates of food insecurity and hunger, and knowing that the loss of their lands and their lifeways is central to that, then the solution must be giving land back. No exceptions. Part of that is also an understanding it's not just about land or money or even culture, but it's about different ways of being in the world, different ways of understanding food and our kinship with food. And I talk a little bit about Robin Wall Kimmerer's portrayal of the honorable harvest, which is ask permission of the ones whose lives you seek. In other words, recognizing that corn is our kin. Never take the first, never take the last. Use everything you take only that which is given to you. Share it. The earth has shared it with you. This is ethos. But I actually also talk about how this is starting to get rooted into international law. I'm very interested in the rights of nature. Just so if those of you who are not familiar with it, some of you probably are already working with it, but it's understanding that Mother Earth is a living being, and that Mother Earth and all of the ecosystems have inherent rights, and that human beings have obligations to Mother Earth. So it's a little bit about honorable harvest, but then now put into international law, which is being used. And the Ojibwe, people of the Ojibwe culture and tradition, have been trying to fight for the safety of their rice for many years, for generations, and now they're trying to utilize the rights of nature to basically show that Monoman is a person and has rights. So this is not sort of, pie in the sky kind of stuff, and while they're struggling with this still, it is a really interesting legal concept. So I also talk about the importance of reparations for enslavement to people who are enslaved. And that's not just compensation for physical and mental harm and lost opportunities, but it's also rehabilitation, ensuring that people get medical and psychological care. It's also about establishing the truth and satisfying the truth and a guarantee of non-repeat. And this is, as you all know, in the United Nations framework, there's a whole way of doing reparations through the human rights frame that I would think are really important. I'm going to skip this slide. It's an old one. And anyway, thinking about the right to food, you all know this, that the rights of indigenous people, the right to food is in there as well, rights to land, so the right to free, prior and informed consent. And I really love the rights of peasants, where the right to food and food sovereignty is built in. So I do talk about that, and we can talk more because you all know more than I do about it, but I just want to circle back around to Gaza for a second and just acknowledge that in 2021, only two states within the United Nations did not sign on to the right to food, and that's the United States and Israel. Take a breath. It's a good thing to do. Just a gentle advisement, what's coming ahead. I'm going to talk a little bit about my book and talk and kind of dive into the pain. So this is a image that's in the book. It's also in the back of the book, and it was given to me by Julene, who was in one of my first studies in Philadelphia. And she brought it to me because I had invited her to our study was over, but she said she needed some money when I ran into her at a food bank. And I said, come to my office and I'll give you the leftover money from my study, and I'd love to talk with you about my work and what I've learned from these interviews and from your interview. And she showed up with this painting for me. And she said, Marianne, I brought this for you. I painted it for you this morning. And I'm giving it to you because I told you things that I've told no one else. And I realized that what you're doing is really important. And I want you to use this painting to teach the world. That put me in a very, in a position of pure accountability, because she's, gifting me something, but also telling me to use her story and use this image to teach the world. So this image has been in my office since I received it. It has at least 5 lessons that I talk about in the book. One is that to share food makes you human. So down inside the barrel, she has a quote from Matthew 7:9, which is, "What man is there among you who, if his son asks for bread, would give him a stone?" Straight out of scripture. And of course, there's the idea that no one would do that, right? But if you do that, first of all, you're not acknowledging the person, the humanity of the person who's hungry. But also, it's an indictment of the person who refuses to share when people are hungry. So it basically puts into question the person who is asked to share, puts into question his or her humanity or their humanity. So when you're sharing food, you're acknowledging your kinship in the human species. Hunger doesn't happen by itself. You all know this. When Julene said, when I was hungry, I had no place to live. I had no clothes. I had nothing. So it's not just that you're in a house and everything is fine and then you go hungry. It's a cascade of really troubling events. It's also a manifestation of severe stress, and I'm glad to be able to show this to you in color. You can look at the orange and green. That is her nerves running up and down. Hunger and trauma land in the body in ways that affect all of our systems, including our ability to maintain our emotional equanimity and our ability to get along with others. Causes early death. You all know this. Anyway, hunger also means that you're isolated. She talked about being alone. And then if you see what she wrote in Sharpie, she said, she says, involve me, I remember, and I understand. In other words, join together in solidarity, friendship, and community. So I took that lesson to heart and started a program called Witnesses to Hunger. I'll talk to you about it in a second. I talk about two heroes in the book. That's Julene is one hero. The other hero is Joanna Simmons. And that's Joanna on the left, getting ready to do a radio interview at the public radio station in Philadelphia. I just love her outfit. And she really is a major, major superhero and a great inspiration to me. And there we are at the White House Conference on Women in 2015. This is Joanna's photograph. In the lower corner, that's not a human being, it's a doll. But you can see that this is Joanna's kitchen. She has no running water. It's not an operable kitchen. Clearly leaks in the roof. And again, living without electricity and without water, but this was not the worst of her problems. She had major sewage coming up through the basement. But that she was trying to figure out how to fix that. It would cost about $3,000. She hardly had 2 tokens to rub together, or 2 pennies to rub together, as she would say. And then her neighbor who, it's a complicated story, but her neighbor who asked Joanna to take this picture said, when a mom gets in a situation like this, they get afraid to ask for help, and this is how children go hungry. And this is one of the earliest images in this program called Witnesses to Hunger. I'll tell you about how that worked just very briefly. Down below in the center, you see Joanna again, and she's right next to Barbie. You may recognize Barbie from A Place at the Table, the film A Place at the Table. So Witnesses was research with a technique called photo voice. So it's participatory action, and I gave the women cameras to take photographs of their experiences, to not just show the world about what they were living through, but to use it as their voice for what they wanted to see that needed to change, what they wanted policymakers and the public and the press to do and to think about. And then it was also about advocacy. So it's about changing the dialogue on hunger and poverty. And we did this through exhibits and different speaking engagements. We talked to the press. There were over 200 different news stories on national television, et cetera. And it's not me speaking for them. It's them speaking for themselves. So this is how it works. That's Imani Sullivan on the left. She's a, quote, participant. That's, quote, the research, the photograph of her son, which they were applying for emergency food stamps. And she's telling her experience directly to Senator Bob Casey Jr., who's a United States Senator. And we're at an exhibit at the Senate Russell Rotunda. So really, it's not just the photographs that were important, but my intent was to get Imani and Senator Casey in the same room talking about what was important to Imani. And so it was really like a platform to get women in front of the microphone to speak their truth and to speak their experiences, and also to help them think about what they would do and say if they were in charge. But there were a lot of hard truths from that. These are some of the photographs, and I'm going to show you just a few more photographs. And one of the hard truths is that Joanna was living without running water, without electricity, with her 2 children. They were at the emergency room all the time because they had terrible rashes and colds because of these terrible conditions they were living in. And she knew that was the reason. This is a wonderful photo by Ashley Ortiz, who said, "This is my metaphor, Mariana, for welfare." This is before, like, most people had cell phones. This is before what was called the Obama phone, where the Obama administration tried to make sure that people could actually communicate with their welfare offices or their parole officer. But Ashley, this was the closest payphone to her. And they were like, yeah, call the office, make an appointment. And even if she can find a phone to call the office and make an appointment, they never pick up the phone. And then they're supposed to call her back. How are they supposed to call her back on this close payphone? No, this is what welfare assistance looks like. There's another photo I don't have in here that's a chain, which we can talk more about. Whitney Henry took this and said, "I'm so tired of seeing the violence in our communities. This is clearly a recent shooting or a stabbing, and there's no police tape. And my daughter was 2 years old and walking past this with her sandals. We were going to the bus stop this morning. I'm tired of the violence." And then many of the members of Witnesses turned the camera on themselves and wanted to express how much they were in pain, their deep sense of depression, and of not mattering to the world. So it was like external photographs of what's happening in the neighborhood, but also internally what's happening. And then many of the women would take pictures of their own bruises, and they would not only use it for Witnesses to Hunger, but also to make a case against violent partners and violent moms. Anyway, So now you understand that this is getting serious. I asked them to talk about experiences with poverty and hunger, and they come back with experiences of pain, violence, trauma. So I've had to learn about trauma and adversity. So as a review, trauma causes lots of changes to the neurological and brain landscape. It affects the endocrine system, creates major mental health problems, inability to focus, disrupted eating, and of course, financial stability. In other words, it's very much related to not being able to have enough money for food and even staying in your job. Here's an example of adverse childhood experiences. There are 10 categories, and it can be measured quantitatively. You can ask these questions of adults, and there are 10 domains in 3 sort of categories, with abuse, neglect, and household instability. These are some of the things that you can measure, whether someone experienced that as a child. We know that ACEs, we call it ACEs for short, ACEs causes heart disease related to diabetes, right? It's a nutrition-related disease, supposedly. But actually, even controlling for all else, if you can actually find that ACEs are oftentimes at the root of diabetes. Anyway, let me take you to emotional neglect, which is why I bring in the love. So just hold on to your seats. Just feel yourself either sitting down or standing. Just, you know, it's going to get tough. This is the questions that I would ask members of witnesses, and I would also ask in my other research. The question is, did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Again, that's one of 10 questions. Now, back to Children's Health Watch. This is straight up epidemiology, and you can, again, I'll share the slide so you can find these citations. So there's food secure, low food secure, and very low food secure in the 18-point food security measure. And I know I'm going so fast, but I wanted to get to the end so we can discuss. These are the ACEs down below. So you see emotional abuse, physical abuse, etc. Household member in prison. People who are food secure do report ACEs. But watch what happens when you get into food insecurity. So low food secure is not as severe as very low food secure, but keep your eye on emotional neglect. There you see it, 56% of the people who reported that they had experienced emotional neglect reported that they were very low food secure. And of course, we did adjusted odds ratios. We controlled for so many things, but I just wanted to show you this in a very stark fashion. In the middle, right here in the middle of ACEs is emotional neglect, which I have stopped calling neglect and I call it lovelessness, which I think is more in line with the question. Now, just as a review, adverse childhood experiences do not happen in a vacuum. We have deep poverty, major depression, those kinds of things are all related to the environment. It's a fractal of what's going on in our society. So I talk about experiences with poverty and discrimination, historical unresolved grief, historical trauma. I talk about poor housing quality and affordability. So it's a fractal. So a lot of people want to talk about ACEs and they're like, oh, it's the family's fault. I actually know the family is in this environment where the roots that cause adverse childhood experiences are right there. So the last thing I wanted to introduce you to is the Building Wealth and Health Network. This is trauma-informed peer support. This is me trying to bypass even policy and just trying to get into a program. We were in temporary assistance for needy families. It's the welfare program, it's the cash welfare program in the United States with moms of little kids. And we help them work through their emotions and come together in a group, and we help them get savings accounts. We were trying to bring in more love and help them bring more love to each other. So it was peer support, 16 sessions. We created savings accounts. We provide social work referrals and financial coaching. All of this, and I'm sorry to show you this. I know it's kind of hard to see, but if you look at food insecures over on the right-hand side, that's when things are really bad. We were able to, this is in a randomized controlled trial. We were able to show that our program was able to reduce the odds of household food insecurity by 64%. And we were most especially successful with people who had 1 to 3 ACEs or 4 or more ACEs. So you can do really great work and create great programs. In this program, there was no food provided. Just my last thing to show you is that this is a woman. We asked people to sort of draw what they were like when they started the program and how they're feeling. And at first you see it was cloudy and rainy and cold in this woman's life, and then she draws what she feels like now. In the middle, she drew a sun and she said, "I love myself." She feels hopeful. She prays. She has self-respect. I like that measure better than the other kinds of things. So I talk about the importance of bringing in more love, and I kind of circle back around to Buddhism, which brings in all different types of qualities of love, loving kindness, compassion, which is not just helping, like empathy, but actually working to alleviate suffering, bringing in a lot more joy. And lastly, equanimity, which is loving without discrimination. And we've got a lot of work to do. We need to transform our society, and I'll stop there. Thank you. Did I?
Thank you. Thank you so
Yes.
much, Mariana. Wow. That was a tour de force.
I went on longer than I wanted to, sorry, but I just can't resist.
No, it's okay. It's I think for me personally, it's an important constant reminder to to go inside, to to not forget that this is for ourselves and for the folks that we work with, that this is that we're inspired by and motivated our experiences and our emotional states. So thank you so
Yes.
much.
Yes, my pleasure. And I'm keeping my camera off because I'm noticing that it's freezing a little bit. So it helps me if I can do that. I'm
Great.
here listening.
All right, great. So I think we'll just open it up for questions, comments. This is your opportunity to kick off our conversation. Jan, you're on mute.
Hi, Jan. I didn't see you here before. Hi, hi.
Late. I'm sorry to say I was late, Mariana, but
No worries.
But I'm here. I want to ask you about reaction to the book. Are you hearing from people? What are you experiencing?
Thank you so much, Jan. And really, thank you for all the inspiration that you've provided me and many of us in this call for carrying on the work. And really, I'm hope I'm doing okay by following in your footsteps. You and Graham, just lots of gratitude. Well, I'm receiving some beautiful emails. Not a lot. I maybe have received 3 emails from people I don't know. When I give my talks, I think people are really moved. And are thank me profusely about talking about love and bringing forward the love, which is wonderful to get that kind of feedback, because that was really kind of worried about that, because most of the time we're talking about food, we get political, human rights, etc. But I think it's striking a nerve in a way that is a little different. And that's wonderful. I've gotten a lot of comments from people I know who've listened to the audiobook, who find that to somehow help get across the emotions and some of the details somehow better than just like reading it on the page. And I'm a finalist for a James Beard Award, so that might be something. Yeah, we'll see. So I don't know, Jan. I don't know if people read anymore. And plus, apparently the title itself is a little off-putting. So the jury's still out, but I've gotten no hate mail related to the book. Let's put it that way. I get hate mail, but not that kind.
Well, I know that your talk at the CUNY Institute was very well received.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I may not be able to see everyone's hands. So if you're not face isn't on the screen, then just please jump in. And Mariana just put the link to where you can find the book, a non-Amazon link, if you so choose. Other comments, questions, reflections?
Good morning. And
Hi.
this was really powerful. Thank you so much. It really resonates with my work. I'm Saida. I'm in New Mexico, working mostly with small scale farmers, mostly indigenous. And
Wonderful.
yeah, just really appreciate you talking about a trauma-informed approach, talking about Land Back, which is a movement that's extraordinary and nuanced in thinking about how that looks and taking leadership from indigenous people on how that looks. I'm in a state with 22 tribes.
Mhm.
And in New Mexico, the people here were never forcibly removed to reservations. This is the only place outside of an island in Alaska where the Native people fought the Europeans and won. So people are on their original land. And so the land back movement is really interesting here because the city I'm in, Albuquerque, is partly on their land. It's like
Mhm.
that's how it got built, it was being on land that's theirs. So I'm curious about this is about the words rights. So you talked about rights of nature, and we're seeing some really powerful work in like Latin America around rights of nature, but also the communities I accompany, that word right and legal rights, that framework has failed them so much, so many broken
Mhm.
treaties, so many things that shouldn't be legal. And so people here talk more about stewardship and responsibility and not rights, not this like legal Western framework. And so it's something I struggle with a little bit, like the two worlds of right to food and then this like responsibility and stewardship that you talked about not taking the first or the last, these indigenous teachings that you were sharing. I'm just wondering
Mhm.
what you think about this legal frameworks and the ideas of rights. I mean, we're in that system, so I understand that we're trying maybe to use the system, but it also can be very jarring to be using those words too.
Thank you, Sarah. What a beautiful question. And by the way, I'm in Santa Fe. I don't know if you caught that. Let's catch up.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I'm only here for a few more days, then off to Vancouver.
Okay.
But write me, I put my email in the chat. I
I'm
think
with
you're
the
up.
Quaker. I'm with the Quaker organizations. And when you were talking about Philadelphia, that's my headquarters.
Oh, wonderful. All right. Um, so it's a beautiful question, and I think you're right. I think we have to use the kind of framework that's useful for the moment wherever we are. And some folks really like to use the rights framework. And some things sort of can get won through the rights of nature framework. Like I know it's worked in New Zealand a little bit, but that's a lot of struggle. It's sometimes the rights are, again, on paper and not really valued or seen as real. I have an unpublished paper called, or actually, no, I have a paper where I do talk about a woman I spoke to talking about human rights are a joke. And they put it there so that they could laugh at me because my rights have never been respected. So I'm totally with you on being duped by this rights framework. And I don't know what to do. That's why I talk about human rights and also rights of nature and bringing more love and honorable harvest. I'm just like everything, all of it. I also have come, I hope you all will forgive me for saying this, but I've come to start to become quite suspicious of the rights framework myself because it's held up by the United Nations, which is based on a nation state system, which is based on global colonization. And just watching how it seems that the United Nations can't seem to stop the genocide that's happening in Gaza, not to mention in Congo and in other places, and in Ethiopia, it makes me really wonder whether this rights framework is really helping. But I also, when I teach human rights, I talk about human rights are a new framework. It's only been around for, between 50 and 70 years, at least in the modern context. So we've got to give it time, and I don't want to throw it out. I want to continue to use it. And I actually think that the rights of nature are far more powerful because it brings in responsibility to all living beings, to all ecosystems, to the earth. And I'm with you on bringing in more sense of responsibility for what we must bring into the world and what we must do into the world. But I'd love to discuss it more with you. Maybe we could work on something together.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and echo that it's certainly a conversation that in trying to develop more of a sort of grassroots, ground up movement, for lack of a better word, around the right to food in the U.S. That there has been quite a bit of pushback isn't necessarily the right word, but certainly inquiry from Indigenous partners that that are very exact, saying what Jade said in her in the chat and what Cider said and you said, that there is this sense of, is that really the framework we want to lean into? And by the way, we don't really have time for this because we're too busy illegally trying to realize the treaties that have already been codified in law.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a constant battle and a constant struggle. And for me, more and more, I am thinking about the how we understand the right, all of its various dimensions, and the idea that we're talking about a fundamental right, and that it is more of it's more of a framework to build power and to inspire action and to bring to bridge sectors that are often siloed. And I don't think it's perfect by any stretch. And it is also the idea that rights, when they're like constitutional amendments, when they're put on paper, that that there's an expectation that it will evolve based on the context, that the meaning, the interpretation will evolve based on the context that you're working in. Sorry, I went on too long. Josh.
Hi, Mariana. It's nice to see you. Thank you for your contribution and for this book. And I look forward to, yeah, maybe doing a reading group with our own Right to Food organizing team here in the fall.
That'd be great.
My question is around engaging folks with trauma into the policy process, which I have, some experience with, and encouraging folks to give testimony at the state capitol, or this one
Right.
moment where we had someone lived experiences of food insecurity and trauma, meeting with the Speaker of the House, and it being this very powerful moment and also a kind of exciting moment at the time, but then almost the futility of that when things don't change can create a sense of discouragement
Mm-hmm.
for the broader movement, and like, well, why am I going to revisit my trauma
Mm-hmm.
again? And then how are we encouraging people to revisit their trauma when nothing is actually changing? So what are your thoughts on engaging in that process well with people and
Yeah.
accompanying them, especially in this moment of discouragement?
Right. Right. So listen, I'm so glad you've gotten as far as you have with helping people provide testimony and making sure that they're involved at the highest levels that you can get them. Congratulations on that. And yeah, it's hell to do it. It's hell for them to talk about their experiences and then be totally inspired and then go back to, to whatever their conditions are and see nothing change, or to see things in the cases of Witnesses to Hunger, to see things change. Like we went to the Senate. Soon after that, there was a 14% increase in SNAP. It was a part of the ERA boost. So members of Witnesses felt like, ooh, my testimony, my photographs really helped with that. That was huge. And then this, a year and a half later, Senator Casey voted to steal money from the SNAP program in order to fund school breakfast and school lunch. They felt totally betrayed. So sometimes it's like, you say your truth, you think you're going to do something and nothing changes, or something changes and then you get whacked again. And so when I work with folks to bring them to the highest levels or wherever I can get them, I work with members of the Building Wealth and Health Network to go to the state capitol. I always remind them as best I can that, this is a drop in the bucket where it's a long fight. Something may not happen, and it's totally up to you whether you want it, what you want to talk about, how you want to talk about it, and what you do. So I work alongside with people to support them with providing a testimony that they feel good about. And I'm constantly reminding them that it's not one and done. It's they're going to pass it on maybe to the next generation. And that sometimes help to ease some of the pain of the betrayal. And I've stopped doing a lot of engagement on things that I think we're not going to see some real action. And I help people that maybe write a blog or write an op-ed. So to do something that is not as public and where you have to put your whole spirit and body into it. And then members of Witnesses have left the program because they're so frustrated and they just want to raise money to buy t-shirts so that they can have a nice t-shirt when they're showing up to do the neighborhood cleanup. And if that's what they want to do, then we help support them in doing that. It's painful thinking that we could be doing system stuff, but there's a lot of power in just doing your own local community work and showing more love and care for your own community. So I'm kind of leaning into those ways of doing and thinking as well. It's a little bit more anarchist. So I don't have a real answer for you, just acknowledgement and solidarity with you. And it's not just painful for them, it's painful for us. I mean, aren't you in pain about the whole thing? It's rough. And so right now, I think we've got to do more things to build community and kinship.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, always cognizant of like not wanting to reproduce or commodify trauma
Yes,
in a
definitely
weird
not.
way that is like, I don't know. We have a lot of conversations about this
Hmm.
together even, and trying to figure out how to move forward. But
Yeah.
and I also really, really appreciate your decentering of food. Yeah, because it's always the immediate fix that's not the fix, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, we
Yeah.
appreciate that. That is
Also,
now in text and written, and we can point to
thanks, Josh. And also,
here.
I've moved away from, I mean, I talk about it in my talks, but when I write about what to do, I kind of focus in on healing rather than trauma. So I kind of focus on the positive. But you have to understand that because it's trauma, this is why we need healing. So yeah, lean into the healing part. What do we need to heal from this and heal our community? That helps you jump over a little bit, but you have to still acknowledge the violence and the suffering too.
Somhak.
Yes. First of all, I have a short question. Have you ever heard about the project of social security for food?
I have not.
You have not? I think I won't explain it now, but just to have the idea that in France, we are working on a proposal that wants to build a first step to the right food by socializing a food system and to govern them as commons. And I won't explain things just now, but one of the core concept of the social security for food is food democracy, because nowadays even people who don't think that they are concerned by food insecurity because they are rich enough or because they are farmers, they can't imagine how much food intertwine and links our life together, because even if you're rich and there's no more food, your money can buy food. First thing, that seems to be very obvious, but even so, you are a farmer, you don't produce your salt, you don't produce your spices, and things like that leads us to understand that as human beings, our condition of eaters make us really equal to one another. Nobody can say that from his or her birth to the end of his or her life is totally independent for food. And I think that maybe the fact about what you are talking about in your book and how we can link and think it to the food democracy, because nowadays, sure, there are social issues, there are discriminations, and we have to point them out, but we also all committed on Earth, and climate change is just on its way for everybody. So food democracy may be a way to build, to find, to experiment, and to cooperate by thinking food system as commons. And I wanted to know if you ever heard about this or thought about this.
I have thought about the commons, and I am not well educated about the whole concept of making sure that food is a part of the commons. And I would love to read more about food democracy and what you're doing in France. It sounds fantastic, and I love this idea of egalitarian or equity. Everybody is an eater. So I was wondering if you'd be willing to put some things into the chat for me, at least. Maybe some other people might already, maybe you all already know this, but I'd love to learn more and
Yes,
to be able to stay
I
in
think I
touch.
will share with Alison and Kaylee, and they will
Okay.
pass it to
Thank you so
And,
much.
I really think that about what food systems are, we can't just let them in place out of law, which is only the global market. And this engages as communities and people, and it has so much impact on social issues and climate change that we can let it out of policies. So let's keep in touch.
Fantastic. Thank you.
I think we have time maybe for one or two more questions, Ian.
Maybe a couple quick questions. One, you're moving to Massachusetts
Yes.
University there. What will you be doing? I'm curious, what's your next projects given, the current political within this current political context? And then if you have time, coming from a health or an epidemiology background, a health background, here in Canada, we're not seeing engagement from the Ministry of Health to the extent that they ought to be engaged in social determinants of health and population health.
Mhm.
What might be the most compelling evidence to bring forward to try to engage our Ministry of Health in working more on food insecurity issues?
I'll answer your second question first, if that's okay.
Sure.
I really am a big fan, going back to Josh's work and my work, is, getting in-person visits with people who are in the Ministry of Health. They have to feel the human connection with people who can explain what's going on for them. Even if it's just a very simple, I've lost access to the local farmer's market and now I can't buy fruits and vegetables. But if you're meeting with people and they need to, it's not going to be a policy brief or an op-ed. Those do help, but you've got to follow it up with a human touch, human, social, warm kinship connection. If people start to feel that, then it helps to drive them into action. It helps them to feel it more, and they actually start to realize. So that would be my first thing, is to figure out how you can get into people's offices and start to convince them. And they're not going to want to, you're a longtime advocate and well-known and all of that, and they'll be like, yeah. But if you're bringing with you people who have the lived experience that they have, and you get people in other towns, other provinces to join you in, kind of putting some pressure on those folks, that really does help. And then start showing up to their conferences, start showing up where they are in person, and find ways to share coffee, cookies, things like that. So my feeling is anything you can do to promote human touch, human social bonds is really important. And I wish you the best of luck on that. The other question is, newsflash, everyone, I am leaving Drexel as of June 30th. I'm going to UMass Amherst School of Public Health and Health Sciences. And my position there is, it's called Professor of Practice. And my job is to be teaching about how to do participatory advocacy, how to translate research and programming or research findings into programming and into policy-related messages. But it's mostly to help other faculty and staff and students who are already there at UMass. What I'm going to do, I don't really know. I'm starting kind of fresh. I'm very interested in continuing to work with women. I'd like to work with women who are returning from prison. I want to work with women in groups, and I'll probably think about doing some kind of thing of quilting and domestic arts and canning and learning how to preserve things. So it's just like community-based kind of food and domestic arts where people come together and work on their emotions, and I'll help them open bank accounts and stuff. So it's kind of like Building Wealth and Health Network, but different name, different ways of doing stuff. I don't know. I got to get there first and see what the land says and see what the people say. Got to listen in first. So the Center for Hunger-Free Communities is going to be closing down sometime soon. My staff is keeping it up and running so far for now, but I'm not sure how long they're going to be able to keep it running. It's a tough situation in the United States right now, as you all know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Funding is disappearing left and right. Well, we have some sort of other announcements and business and things to tend to, but Mariana, thank you so much. I mean, personally, just from the bottom of my heart, and love being always in community with you and learning from you, and yeah, your wisdom and your evolving wisdom is always so something I paid deep attention to. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's mutual, Allison. Thank you very much for inviting me. And thank you, everyone. I put my email in the chat, my personal email, and I'd love to be in touch and be in conversation and continue to learn alongside you. Thank you. I'm going to bow out.
Thank you, Mariana. Thank you so much.
Yep.